Cybersecurity concerns are ever evolving. OT cybersecurity is even more complex, and it's so much more than just software and hardware. How do you stay on top of it all? Aaron Crow has over 25 years experience with cybersecurity. 15 of those years focused on operational technology across multiple industries, and he wants to help you. Welcome to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Industrial Defender. Now here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Welcome to the show, Michael. Thank you for taking your time. We've had some technical difficulties and reschedules and playing with microphones, but it's all part of the game, right?
we made, like I said, yeah, we wouldn't have a job if we didn't have technical issues. So
absolutely,
I appreciate
thank you.
it. Yeah,
thank you for joining me. And go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the audience who you are, what your background is, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me, and I appreciate everybody for listening in. So my name's Michael Holcomb. I'm the Fluor Fellow over for Cybersecurity for Fluor. We are one of the larger engineering and construction companies in the world. So I'm very fortunate to get to work with some of the best engineering minds in the world. Just to get an idea of the size and scope of the environments that we work in, usually our projects are $500 million plus. We work in some of the, at least within the United States, some of the nation's most sensitive environments like nuclear work. We work with a lot of the national labs, like everything from Los Alamos to Savannah River and some other facilities. We work with some of the world's largest, companies, Shell, Saudi Aramco, SABIC, and build environments for them. And many of those, as you would imagine, have control systems. Some of the world's largest environments with control systems. So again, I'm very fortunate to work in the environment and with the people I do, to be able to learn, from them every day, and then share a little bit from the cybersecurity side as well. So that's a little bit of what I do in my day job. And then also, I think most people I come across these days, I meet through LinkedIn, which is where we had come across each other. And so I post a lot there about, mostly about, helping folks get into OT cybersecurity, because that's a passion of mine. And I remember how frustrating it was when I tried to get into OT back in 2010. And when Stuxnet was first announced. So I talk a lot about that, and then also, helping owners and operators really come up with a roadmap and how to build a cybersecurity management program for their OT environments. So.
Yeah, we talked briefly yesterday, and I shared with you, I came from working in power utility. My father worked in power utility for 40-something years, so I've worked with Fluor a lot, from building large scale power plants for the company I worked for, doing refueling outages and things like that, our nuclear facility, and a lot of the engineering work that went around that stuff.
Sure.
Anything at a nuclear facility is 3 levels of documentation before you ever touch a nut and bolt or anything, right? So
right, very true.
It's always a lot of engineering, but it's a lot of fun to see. But all the way up to control systems and designing those, from turbo controls to the balance of plant stuff, and really hand in hand with Fluor. Like it was really. Yes, we had in-house engineers and all that kind of stuff, and they were still part of it, but there was just no way we could support that large of an effort in-house. So we had to work with large scale engineering firms like Fluor to help us to build out those things. So it was exciting for me to see, hey, in all of my interactions with Fluor in the past, it was just on the engineering side. It wasn't on the cyber side. So to see you, talk with you yesterday, and to see, obviously you guys have a cyber program, or initiative around cyber, because it's part of the things that you're building. It has to be now. So it's part of all business as we see nowadays, right?
Yeah, and it's great to see how it's changed, especially the last couple of years, where prior to, and I think Colonial Pipeline was a big shift for the industry, and where we saw, prior to Colonial Pipeline, we would have some clients come to us and not necessarily want to talk about cybersecurity, or they said, we have OT cybersecurity handled, don't worry about it. And it says, okay.
Right.
Where today all of our clients are, we're having those conversations with them. I also, do, lead the ICS cybersecurity practice, and it's great to be able to have those conversations with them and make sure that when we're designing an environment, whether it's for commuter rail or a liquid natural gas facility or a power plant or pit mines or so on and so on, we want to make sure that yes, that facility, that site, that plant accomplishes the mission it was designed to do, but we also want to make sure that it's as secure as possible from a cybersecurity perspective. So most importantly, we're protecting life, right? We're making sure everybody goes home at the end of the day to their families, to their friends. We're protecting the environment. And then we're worried about the availability of the site. But
Sure.
But yeah, it's great that since Colonial Pipeline that we're having those conversations with clients, and they take it very seriously. Not that most didn't before, but it's we're involved in all the projects. So when we're doing the engineering, when we're doing the design, that from the get-go, we're building in the different controls and aspects of cybersecurity. Again, really to build a cyber secure facility within the client's requirements.
Sure.
Obviously, things like budget come into consideration. So we get, we come up with a long list and roadmap for them, and it's at the end of the day, it's a business decision, right, for the owners to determine how much they can invest and how much they can do upfront, and then have a roadmap to continue to improve over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's amazing. And we have a similar career path. Obviously I was an asset owner and you were on the engineering side, but still 2010 is really when I kind of jumped into this OT cybersecurity thing. And it's amazing some of the large scale programs I've done and implementations, from control system upgrades to segmentation, that kind of thing. And how in the beginning it was always optional. It was an afterthought. It was a line item that nobody wanted. Maybe NERC-CIP, and obviously coming from power utility, NERC-CIP required them to do some things, but they wanted to do the least amount possible because they saw it as they didn't see it the same way as we're starting to see it now, where I think it's starting, the message is starting to get out there. Cybersecurity helps with your availability, right? So you want to segment. Colonial Pipeline's a great example. You want to segment your environment so that you don't have one thing that can bring down your entire organization, that can shut down your power plant, that can shut down your rail system, that can shut down your mining operation. Like you want to architect these environments and these systems so that they're resilient. And we've done that for decades in critical infrastructure, in OT, in systems design. Cybersecurity was this thing that we saw as an IT problem, and we didn't realize it. A lot of folks didn't realize that was really part of really designing a healthy system, is ensuring that you have security, not because necessarily you're trying to stop China, but because you're trying to stop anything from spreading. And I have lots of examples that had nothing to do with a bad actor and everything to do with because the design of the system wasn't great, and impact over here made a problem on the other unit that had nothing to do with each other, but because of the way they designed the system, it impacted it. And that's a great example in a place that I see us starting to make progress in. And I love hearing again that Fluor is at the leading edge of that to help drive these customers to understand those differences in just a cyber policy versus actual system design.
Yeah, it's definitely, being involved from the ground up, which is great. And it even, getting to work with customers, getting in there, even doing things like threat intel briefings, giving them an understanding of what the threat landscape out there looks like, just in general, not alone what's specific to their environments, right? What their sector, that they work in, where that site operates in, right? What part of the world are they in? We work in just about every country, and six continents. It's very different, and we work in most sectors. We work in just about every sector except healthcare, and water treatment.
Right.
So we're pretty much a little bit here and there. So I get to see a lot, and it's really, being able to have those conversations, help the owners, the operators understand that threat landscape. But also, yeah, it's kind of one of the points that you hit on was this idea that it's everything is not a cybersecurity issue.
Right.
And we have to keep that in mind. And it's just like in IT, right? We come from IT backgrounds where it's, if you're going to the business, you can't run around and use the fear and the uncertainty and the doubt or run around. Exactly. You can't be Chicken Little, right? The sky's falling and it doesn't work, right? And at the end of the day, the budget, what you're going to be able to do, the team members are going to be able to have, right? It's a business decision at the end of the day, right? How much risk is that owner, willing to take on, right? It's up to them at the end of the day. So we can bring that knowledge, we can bring those skill sets, we can do all the briefings that we have time to do, but really it's helping them understand what is possible and what they should do, at least what we think they should do, and then helping them make the right decision for their business, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think another piece to this is our careers and our journey to get where we are, right? So coming from the IT side and seeing the problems on that side and the way that things are done, and then incorporating that into the work and the way things are done on the OT side, understanding the differences, but also not just throwing something away or an idea away because it's well, that's how IT does it, right? And really being able to do that. So I see that as a strength. And you talked about early is one of the things that you're passionate about, and I am as well, is how do we get people into OT? Because we need more and more resources that understand this, that are able. Because the one thing I see from when I was working at EY and across a lot of large companies is the skills gap, right? They don't have people that have the understanding in the places they need them, or maybe they've got one, but it's not enough. And how do we? And it's not just the companies, it's not just the asset owners, it's also the Fluors and the EYs, and there's a huge skills gap in this space. But it's that whole cart before the horse, or chicken and egg, right? Is how do I get into OT if I don't have any OT experience? Okay.
It's hard, and it gets even more complicated because really it's not just people from IT, right, especially with IT cybersecurity backgrounds, that we want to learn OT, but we also want the folks that are already in OT today, right? The engineers, the other automation team members, the folks, the technicians, even the people sitting in the control room, right? We want them also to take that interest or want to pick up and learn cybersecurity. So, and it's a little tricky sometimes, right? Because if you're coming from the OT world, how you get started is very different than how you come from the IT world. And then once you're up and running, right? Once we can take somebody from IT, and we always talk about focusing things on like learning how to program a PLC, right? And learn the different fundamentals of the different control systems that exist, right? Start to learn that world. Think like an engineer, right? I think for me, it was really when the aha moment for me was getting into OT was when I could start to learn and think like an engineer. Not only did it, I think, really make me, my just kind of the way I thought, right? It made it fit to OT cybersecurity. Plus, the additional benefit was I could actually have conversations with folks on the OT side, and they wouldn't blow me off most of the time, right? So, they understood. It was like, oh, hey, he's from IT, but he's taken the time to learn, right? And then you slowly build that experience, and you listen to. Whenever I'm in engineering meetings, I mostly just listen more, because I'm just every time, every meeting I'm learning something new. And I've been doing that now for 10 years, getting into engineering meetings, and again, learning something new every day. So but when you can actually speak in their terms and they understand that you're thinking along those lines, they're like, oh yeah, okay, we can work together. And what do you want to talk about for cybersecurity? Help us understand. So it's a big focus of, how we secure our environments. And this is a big focus for me today is that IT OT partnership, right? Because if a lot of environments, I've seen the great ones, I've seen the worst ones, and everything in between, where if you have IT and OT at each other's throats, you always talk about it's the only people that are winning are the attackers, right? We're not getting anything done. There's no cooperation. And so it's a big part of kind of coming full circle and back to where we started was we need more people from both IT to learn the OT side of the house, and then we need people in OT to learn cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it takes time, and not everybody in OT cares about cybersecurity.
Right.
And honestly, right, not a lot of people in IT cybersecurity care about OT,
right?
Which is sad, right? I always feel like, what do you mean you don't care about OT cybersecurity, right? But I realized that was just like, when I was running around, very into cybersecurity, trying to convince the IT folks, to secure the environments. So it's just not something that everybody's interested in. So there's not a lot of people out there that are interested, and it takes time, definitely to learn and then start to slowly build those skill sets. And then it's even harder, I think, to try to get actual real world hands-on experience in OT for somebody coming from an IT background. I was very lucky, right, to fall into Fluor.
Right.
So
yeah, and again, like we talked yesterday, my path is similar. I was working in a power utility, and we were doing this NERC stuff, and we were expanding the team, and there were no OT people. Like that wasn't a title, right? Nobody had OT in their history. Like it was, you had technology, but it was, it wasn't OT. It was kind of a new term at that time anyway. So I was trying to build out a team, and I was looking to hire 4 to 5 people. But what would the job description be? So, we had a lot of engineering stuff in there and that kind of stuff, but I was able to hire and bring in, technologists, people with, networking, CCNA and that kind of stuff, and really embed them and teach them. Fortunately, probably the best thing in the world was I hired these people, and they started out, they went to onboarding, the employee orientation, and then they immediately reported to a power plant. So we were doing outages, we were doing control system upgrades across 6 power plants in 1 year. So we basically went from outage to outage to outage to outage. So they learned through a fire hose in the fire.
They did
firsthand and didn't have a choice, right? It was the next 6 months of their lives was spent working, 7 days a week, 16-hour days in outages. But the other side of that, they got all of this amazing on-the-job training because they understood why the operators were concerned. They understood how an outage worked. They understood availability and what it took to, upgrade a control system and how it was so difficult, and working with the vendors. Like it was priceless, right? There was no way, there was no training. You couldn't go to SANS, you couldn't go anywhere and learn that level of training. And it was unfortunately, we don't have like an apprenticeship, program in OT or in a lot of industries nowadays, but that's the way you do it. And as I built, so I got 3 people from the technology side, and then I brought 2 to 3 people from the OT side, like you were talking about, right? As I took controls engineers and such and brought them in. So I had this mix of technologists and OT people, and built this amazing team that we were able to, depending on the problem, hey, you're the OT guy. How do we solve this?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it sounds like I'm jealous because that sounds like you had, a great team that you built up. I mean, that to me sounds like kind of the nirvana, right? The perfect environment where you're able to bring those 2 different, the 2 different sides of the house together, because at the end of the day, we all live under that same roof and we're trying to protect the same house. And so you were able to do that in that environment, which is really great. So, and very super jealous of all the practical, very real world experience they got very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah, that's very hard for a lot of people to do. So it's people struggle, even in IT trying to get into a cybersecurity job, let alone well, how do I get into OT cybersecurity, with hands-on, and so, there's only, so many training courses and certifications, and some which are very expensive, unfortunately. And then, I think you've seen good traction with people that build the home labs, go out and get a, whether it's off of eBay, grab a PLC, or like Automation Direct, right? The Click series are great, right? Fully loaded, brand new for like $400.
Right.
Learn PLC programming, grab an HMI, and again, still not super cheap, right? But it is something to get people started. And I've seen those, the folks that take those additional steps, eventually they do get there. Which is great, because it's one of those where I mentioned not everybody in IT, and especially cybersecurity, is interested in OT.
Sure.
So for those that do, and they go to that degree, to that length, it really demonstrates the passion that they have for the field. And I think it's just a matter of time before somebody will give them a job.
Yeah, I mean, it mirrors exactly what, if I look back at my career, all of my career was that very thing. I would do things on my own time. I would spin up a Windows server, or I went and bought a bunch of old Cisco switches and routers off of eBay, and built a home lab so I could practice for my CCNA, because I wasn't a network guy. I was doing networking stuff, but that wasn't my title, and I wanted a networking role. Well, I knew nobody would give me that job without any experience, and how do I do that, and certification, all that kind of stuff. So same thing. I went and bought a lab, bought equipment, and I started practicing at home and building out labs and playing with it. And that was priceless. It helped me get into different roles and take on different responsibilities. So when that opportunity came, and I think that's the thing that for me, at least, in my career, it was being ready when the opportunity presented itself. Right. I was in a place, and I wanted this other thing, or I wanted this change. Same thing when I was at the power company. They didn't hire me for the OT job. They hired me for something else, and then the OT job came up, and I was the only person that could do it. So by the way, starting Monday, you are now the OT person. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah. Congratulations.
Exactly. I'm glad it happened, but that wasn't my plan. But because I had done that other work, I had done that lab work, I had a networking background, an infrastructure background, like that. Those were all the things that they need, and nobody else on the team had the skill set that I had. So I was able to naturally fit, and I obviously understood the OT side of the house as well. So it was a perfect mirror, but it didn't happen overnight. It took years of me to get there, to build up those capabilities, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's, it kind of reminds me, right now with, where we're at within Fluor, we have 4,000 between control systems and electrical. We have 4,000 engineers.
Right.
And it's working on how do we get them, prepared for cybersecurity.
Sure.
And so that's something that I've been working on, especially the last couple of years, and doing everything from training courses to building the new practice to making sure that there's a full kind of flow and process for when we're building cybersecurity specs for clients, that we're going through that process to get that training and that knowledge and the skills and the experience in the hands of those engineers. But like you mentioned, it takes time.
Yeah.
No matter which side of the house you're coming from. So it's all those pieces that have to come together between the knowledge and getting the experience and build from there. So yeah, definitely.
I know you talk about it a lot, but give the listeners, like, if they're new, maybe they're in IT, maybe they just graduated with an engineering degree, whatever the scenario may be for them. Like, what is a good path? Like, how can people today start looking and trying to get into, OT, into cybersecurity, even if it's on the IT side? Like, what are some of the recommendations that you have?
Sure, yeah. So when you're coming from the IT side, and real quickly, so I did write a couple of free ebooks that cover whether you're coming from IT or from OT. So you can find them on my LinkedIn profile that people are looking for, or check out MikeHolcomb.com. You can find them there as well, and some other resources. But yeah, if you're coming from IT, right, one of the first things we have to start to look at is, and mention this earlier, is learn to think like an engineer. So, and there's a bunch of, you throw in the ebook, but there's a bunch of resources, whether you can start taking engineering courses, like MIT has a lot of free ones, and you don't have to go too deep, right? But just enough to kind of, again, start thinking from that perspective. And then when you talk about not only thinking like an engineer, but then understanding, right, the different types of operational technology or control systems that are out there. So it really is, you need to take the time, at least I know for myself, coming from an IT background, as I always wondered, well, power plants just work, right? They don't have computers. That's probably what I was thinking, 20 years ago. And it was just like, but then it's like, a cyber attack could impact a power plant. Well, how does that work, right? And then I was having to answer those questions, and that got into, well, I really have to understand, okay, so what is a PLC and an HMI, or when you talk about a process, or even just terms like owner and operator, right? Those sound probably very simple to understand, but for someone, at least again, personal experience coming from IT, it's like I could probably guess, but was I 100%, right on the nose? Maybe, maybe not. So there's a lot of learning that goes in place. And so that's where, for me, I was very lucky. I worked for a company that did send me to my first, the SANS GICSP course, 10 years ago with Justin Searle, right? So had a great course to introduce all those concepts. And at that point, thankfully, I had, some exposure through my job at Fluor. But then at the same time, it was also looking at things that I wasn't exposed to yet. And I think you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but it was also, I think, even realistically, as much as there's technical information in that class, I think the best thing I took out of it was that the first morning, the first day, the first person that asked a question, it was a gentleman, and he came from the OT side, and he worked in water treatment. And he asked a question, and it was a very simple question, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but around networking. And I was like, oh, well, that's a really simple answer. And then at the same time, it was, well, I understood not everybody from OT understands the basics of things like IT networking, right? But also the way he asked the question was very different than I would have asked it from a IT background. And so then it was just an eye-opening week, because that class was probably 50% IT people and 50% OT people. And really the benefit of that course was being able to talk with the other people, right? Sharing with them, learning from each other. And that's where, kind of continue to build off of that, whether it's conversations on LinkedIn, or right now I'm doing in the evenings a free 20-hour course on IT, OT, cybersecurity, getting into it. And a big part of that is it's not just listening to me talk for 20 hours, it's be in Discord and having those conversations with the other people in the class, because we have people from IT, we have people from OT, from all different years of experience and all different types of environments from all around the world. And I think there's over 200 people in class this week. So it's a lot of fun, and because you can learn just by sharing and listening to others.
Yeah, so. and that mindset, and that's the other piece to this is we talk about OT cybersecurity because it's the thing that's in the news, Stuxnet and attack. But you hit on something right there. A lot of OT people don't understand networking, right? That's a pretty basic thing. So, for instance, going back to my story of the team I built out, that was one of the skill sets that I looked for. If they understand networking, everything in this environment is based upon networking, right? So I can build upon, if you can understand that networking layer, I can teach you the OT stuff. I can explain to you what a control system is, and, understanding the difference between a control system and a SCADA system and a PLC and a RTU, and like all of those terms, all of those are things that you can learn on your own. You can read a book. You don't even have to go to class to that. Like Google, AI, Chat GPT, like you can ask all of these things, the capabilities are there. Like you can start training yourself, taking classes, listening to podcasts like this one, taking classes like yours. A friend of mine, Josh Vargas, he has the networking side, right? You know, Josh has he just does networking.
Right,
He's very adamant that he is not a cybersecurity person. He is just networking, right?
Right. That is his focus. Yeah, he does an awesome job.
But the point is there's all sorts of different ways to get into this business, right? There's the networking side, the application side,
sure.
Like go work for a vendor. Like there's a lot of different skills that we need. It's not just all, you know, threat hunting and red teaming and the fun things some people are looking at. There's a lot of stuff. Like when I got those hard hats and I was working in a power plant, we weren't red teaming. Like we weren't doing threat hunting. Like most of my projects that I was rolling out was to make sure the control system integrated and was segmented so that, you know, again, something on unit 1 wouldn't impact unit 2, right? And yes, we also put firewalls in, and yes, we put Splunk in, and we put a bunch of cyber things in there too, but that's not why the business wanted it. The business wanted it because the other things I was doing was helping them be more reliable. And that they can understand that to a business level and be on board with that. Whereas when I started talking cyber, their eyes just glazed over and they're like, I don't want that. I'll just disconnect my control system and I don't need that.
Right. It's great. Yeah, no, I love having those conversations, especially when you talk about things like SIM, because a lot of environments still don't do network security monitoring, right?
Yeah.
Probably at least half, right? If not more, or and even those that do probably don't do a really good job at it. And so, but when you can have those conversations around SIM, that's why I love OT, you know, doing network security monitoring in OT. It's not just about finding the bad actors in the environment, because that's going to be very rare. But you can also use the data you're collecting to help identify operational issues. So when you can take like a concept of a SIM and network security monitoring, you know, capabilities and translate to we can use this to help you identify issues proactively in the environment that you can fix to prevent downtime. That's something that the owners and the operators love to hear, right? And so that's a win-win, because you're getting those capabilities from a cybersecurity perspective, but it also helps ensure the availability of the environment.
Yeah, so, and I have multiple examples that I could talk through, and I've mentioned before, but you know, one that comes to mind around that was they brought in my team after the fact. This certain power plant didn't want to do any of this OT stuff, right? It wasn't a requirement, it wasn't a NERC site, so they didn't really want to put our stuff in until they had a vendor, the control vendor, I won't name the name, but the control vendor came in and they were doing an upgrade on one of the units. It was a 2-unit site with a common. So there was unit 1, unit 2, and a common. And they were upgrading unit 2. And unit 2 was offline in a maintenance mode, and unit 1 was still running, right? It was still, you know, generating electricity. Well, the control vendor came in and upgraded the unit 2 that was offline, and it was all one big flat network, and it had an integrated Active Directory. So they were upgrading the Active Directory domain controller, and something didn't work in their script. Yeah. So the next thing, the troubleshooting step they did is, okay, we'll just build a new domain controller. So they built a new domain controller, but there's a little question in the beginning. It says, do you want to join an existing domain, or you want to create a new forest? They create a new forest with the same name and same domain controller and same IP address. So they don't know the difference. So they brought up unit 2. Unit 2 was working just fine. But then they started having problems on unit 1 where about 24 hours later, all of the screens in the control room smurfed. All the values went to 0. So the operators couldn't control the unit. Now, the unit was running fine because the controllers were doing their thing. They didn't care about any of this, but the operators couldn't see anything. So what happened? They punched the unit out.
Right, they lost visibility.
So that's an example of all of the tools. So they brought us in because the vendor was like, I don't know what happened, like blah blah blah. So they brought us in to do analysis and figure out what happened. So we pulled all the logs in. I had Splunk running on a laptop. We pulled them all in, and we were able to actually show, at this time you built a new domain controller, and then we started getting 1 million authentication requests a second.
Sure.
Oops.
What wonder you're having issues.
And
yeah,
finally, when the
exactly.
tokens timed out, it stopped working. So we were able to use these tools to show the vendor that came in, hey, this is where you made the problem. We had to take the unit down for 3 days and lose production because of an issue that you guys had. And then it was very easy to explain why segmentation, why firewalls, why I want to isolate these environments so that something like that wouldn't impact a separate unit, and they're completely disconnected, right? It goes against IT architecture, but it's exactly why I would never put, multiple units on a single domain or have them on a flat network, even though it makes it easier and it's a lot harder to manage. But there's examples like this why it makes it a risk to operations to have it all, combined together.
Yeah, and like you had highlighted earlier, right? The idea of
Right.
resiliency, right? I want to build these cyber resilient environments so that way, whether it's like I think of Colonial Pipeline, even if the IT environment is completely burned down, I want to make sure that my OT environment is still up and running, right? There is no reason why that the largest gasoline pipeline in the United States was taken offline for 10 days. Right, from a ransomware infection, right? We understand, yes, it happened, but if we build cyber resilient environments, we should not have had to do that. And then, even kind of to your point, even internally within the OT environment, doing that further segmentation, right? And that's, of course, we get into all those conversations of, IT, OT, DMZs, and then Purdue models and further segmentation around zones and conduits with 62443. But we want to build those environments so that way, if something bad happens in some part of the environment, right, it doesn't impact, right, going back to, right, make sure we're not impacting physical safety, environmental safety, and operations.
And this goes back to what Fluor's doing right now, right, is as you're designing these systems, having somebody with a networking understanding, having somebody that understands how Active Directory works and how all these, because the control system engineer is looking at, I need to make this thing be able to talk to that thing so I can open this valve and I can read this pressure and I can control this thing. They don't necessarily understand the networking layer or the implications of a design. So having somebody with that expertise at the table is super important when you're designing the system so that it meets the OT guys' requirements and needs to control the plant, while it's also not throwing away the segmentation and the operational reliability and availability on the networking layer and the other technology layers that are part of the design as well.
Yeah, and that's partly what I saw, and we were starting to touch earlier on it, like how IT people can get into OT cybersecurity, but then also, for OT people, how they get into OT cybersecurity, because you kind of highlight some of the things that I didn't realize, right? I'm going into, and I'm working with all these engineers, and obviously all very brilliant people. And at the same time, most didn't know what an IP address is or what TCP/IP was. I was like, wait, what do you mean? What? It's like, oh, well, we have the telecom group that does that, right? Or it's like, oh, so that was something that was really strange. So that's why when I say the first thing for OT people coming to learn OT cybersecurity, you have to learn networking, right? Learn networking fundamentals, and then building into learning the basics of cybersecurity. Right. I always point everybody to even just the materials for Security Plus, right? There's so many materials out there for free to almost low cost, where you can go out and pick up that information. That gives you the basics, and then we can have that common foundation where we can start to have conversations around how do we apply this in OT. And it really is very effective in helping them understand. But yeah, it's funny when you start. I just had never realized, probably especially the first time I went on site, which was probably about 2012. So about 11 years or so. And I remember two things, going into a power plant, and one was the engineering team, the the gentleman that was leading the team, brought me in and said, and it's like, oh well, and he was walking through the servers, and he was like, oh yeah, here's Active Directory. I was like, I never even thought about having an Active Directory, right, in a plant. So I was like, well, I can help you with that, right? I'm a big Active Directory cybersecurity, person. I was like, and still am. So it's like, I can help you with that. And then the other one, I try not to laugh, and I think I did a pretty good job, but they were really proud of their new firewalls that they had gotten and put into place, and then opened up the rack and showed me, and they were Cisco Catalyst switches. And so I had to try to explain to them, those aren't firewalls. There are differences, and there's a whole conversation, but it was really eye-opening to understand, or to see that, everybody on the OT side or the engineering side didn't necessarily know things, about TCP/IP, Active Directory, a lot that we bring over from the IT world. So IT/OT convergence really has made a very interesting, world for us to live and work in, undoubtedly.
Yeah, and if you look at the OT side, right, and you talk those control system engineers and all these, to your point, brilliant people. But that's not their skill set. That'd be like going to your plumber and expecting him to be able to, do your electrician, do electrical work, right? It's not that he's not smart. Could he figure it out? Probably, but that's not what he was trained for, right? That's not his role. Like when a new house is being built, they bring the plumber in to do the plumbing. They don't ask the plumber, hey, could you also do the electrical work? No, the electrician comes in and does that. Like I know what he does. I've seen it enough. I could probably figure it out, but that wouldn't be make to code. I'm not going to be doing it at the same level as somebody that has been trained and that's what they do for a living. So it's unfair for us to expect an OT person that has done control system work and designing systems to understand networking. Like the problem though is that around 20 years ago or whenever we started bringing these commercially off the shelf capabilities and technologies into the OT space, because back in the day, control systems were, proprietary black box things that the vendors did, right? Then at some point, they started bringing in Microsoft and VMware and Cisco switches and firewalls and all of these things that lived in the IT world, but they didn't bring the 20 years of experience that we had in the IT world building those systems and how to design and secure them. They just kind of threw them in place. Because it was cheaper, it was easier, it was faster, it gave us some more capabilities. But that's the reason why we started having these systems that weren't designed well. Like we used the same IP address across every, control system across the world. What, drop 200 is and what its IP address is, right? And anybody that works in control systems knows what control vendor I'm talking about, but it's not just them, it's all of them, right? And it's because they didn't have a person sitting there thinking, hey, if we deploy this everywhere and a customer has multiple units at a site, much less multiple sites, and they have the same IP address at all those sites, and we ever want to get to a place where we want to bubble that up, what are we going to do about that?
Right. Yeah, it was a hard learning curve, I think, for a lot of people for many years. So yeah, definitely. And you still see some of that today.
It's still there.
For sure. But it is. It's getting better. Undoubtedly, just like security in OT, it's getting better. We still have a long way to go, but I think we should give ourselves credit. We've definitely also come a long way.
Well, Mike. So what next 5 to 10 years? What is one thing that maybe you're excited about coming up over the horizon, and maybe something that you're concerned about coming over the horizon that you see?
Yeah, I won't say AI.
I get that one a lot.
Exactly. I'm sure, and I've listened to the podcast. You actually are, I didn't even mention earlier, you actually are, I do a lot of resources in the ebooks and actually have the podcast listed in there. But anyways, back just to throw that out there, but just back to the question, I'm really excited about the changes we're seeing from. And what we were talking about mostly here is, more IT people, IT cybersecurity folks learning OT, the ones that are really passionate about it. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to protect the world around us, right? They want to make a difference, right? Those people coming in, and then the OT people doing the same thing, right? They want to make a difference, and they're learning cybersecurity, and again, it's not something that happens overnight for someone. It takes years, right, for somebody to get a firm handle on both sides of the equation to then be a true cybersecurity defender or professional, whatever term we want to use. So, but I'm really excited to see. It's just amazing, especially the interactions I have on LinkedIn. It just more people from both sides that are getting into cybersecurity for OT and want to make a difference and are. So it's just, I think that's just going to continue. So that's really exciting. The one thing that I still always worry about, and one of the things that's really sad, I think, to me about the OT cybersecurity industry, and this even goes for folks that are new to the industry, and even some of the old players that have been out there for 20, 30, maybe 40 years plus, is there's still, in some respects, like not a lot of concern, some around what's it really going to take for people to take cybersecurity and OT seriously. And so there's going to be that event one day that people are going to die, right? That is going to finally force people to take cybersecurity and OT as seriously as it needs to, because today there's still some that, well, we haven't had somebody die from sure, there's some examples that we could we could talk about, or that just because we don't know these things they have, but in general, right, it's a lot of people use that as an excuse to not do things today, right? Oh, well, we don't need to worry about cybersecurity because nobody's died from a cybersecurity attack in an OT environment, right? That's something you hear a lot, which is very, very unfortunate. And so people using that as an excuse not to do something about cyber today, it's disheartening, to say the least. And it's kind of like in IT, there's that saying, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, right? And it is coming. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be next year, it could be 10 years down the road, probably sometime between now and then, but it is coming. And it's going to be sad because that environment's not prepared, and they could have taken steps to prevent that from happening.
A lot of times I see it as the business is accepting a risk that they don't understand, right? They're saying, oh yeah, we're good with that. I've heard it 100 times. We've ran this plant for 40 years and we've never had that problem, right? Okay. How do you know you've never had that problem, right? And the other side of the analogy I always give is, it's like you go buy a brand new car, right? You buy a brand new car today and and you never change the oil. You drive that car for, let's say, 5 years, and you're like, all you people changing your oil, you're just wasting your money. I've driven this car for 5 years and never had a problem. Eventually you're going to have a problem. Like eventually it's going to catch up with you.
That it just
eventually you're going to seize up a motor and you're going to have an expensive lesson, right? But it hasn't happened yet. Yeah. So you're playing that edge and you're getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And unfortunately, I agree with you. I fear that it's going to take a big incident, a big event to happen for people to say, oh, okay, wow, it's real. This isn't fire and brimstone. This isn't Chicken Little. This isn't just, salespeople trying to convince me to buy something I don't need. Maybe I actually do need this thing, and we should start looking at this thing more seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So all we can do is continue to fight the good fight, right? Keep doing what we're doing and keep working with getting more people, into the field and protecting more environments and
that's right.
See what happens next.
I really enjoy seeing all your posts on LinkedIn, and I mean, it's just just seeing it's always valuable. It's always, a lot of information and places to go look for things and learn more, et cetera. And that's obviously why I do this podcast, right? I want to get the message out there. I want to have people like you that have experiences that we can share our experiences and say, hey, here's how we've done it. It doesn't mean we know all the answers. Like, we're not pretending to be, I hate the word expert, right? I don't claim to be an expert.
You would be both.
I think I have a lot of experience that I'm valuable in, but I don't like using the word expert because I just don't feel anybody is an actual expert. Expert means I can't learn anything else. I'm at the top and I'm hanging up my cowboy hat. Like, that's not me. I'm not there.
Yeah. No. No.
So tell the
Me
listeners,
either.
you mentioned your ebook and your website, but anything else you want them to know, how to find you, get more information, et cetera. You talked about your class as well, and we'll put all those show links in the show links here. So all that'll be available for the listener to just click on those links in the show notes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But yeah, the best places to find me, I mean, realistically, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So that's usually the easiest place for people to find me. Most people are there in some way, shape, or form. So you can find me there, all my resources, and trying to post daily, at least Monday through Friday, to get, kind of just different content out there, kind of original content, to help kind of either people get into the industry or learn more about securing their environments that they have today. So, and then MikeHolcomb.com for kind of a bunch of the links to all the other resources, to the free training and the ebooks and all that fun stuff to again kind of help in those areas that I focus on. But I appreciate the time.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
the
for
invite.
coming. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
enjoy talking.
Keep putting out the good fight,
definitely.
and we'll just keep getting the message out there and being a resource for people to reach out to. So I appreciate your time today, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast. If you got some valuable information from today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Aaron and to get your free copy of the OT Cybersecurity Solution Buyer's Guide, go to industrialdefender.com. That's industrialdefender.com, or you can click the link in the show notes.